The morning sun cast golden rays through the ancient stained glass windows of Westminster Abbey as Prince William stood before the ornate mirror in his private preparation chamber. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the ceremonial robes that would soon make him King William V. The weight of centuries pressed down upon his shoulders. But it wasn't the heavy crown waiting for him that made his breath catch in his throat. Sarah, his longtime dresser, noticed the prince's unusual stillness. She had prepared royal garments for decades, but something felt different about this morning. William's eyes held a distant look, as if he were seeing beyond the present moment into memories that tugged at his very soul. The crimson velvet and golden embroidery of his coronation attire lay perfectly arranged, yet he seemed reluctant to put on the final pieces. Outside, millions of people lined the streets of London, their voices creating a symphony of excitement and anticipation. Flags waved from every window, and the air buzzed with the energy of a nation celebrating its new monarch. Television crews from around the world had positioned themselves strategically to capture every moment of this historic day. And inside the Abbey's preparation room, time seemed suspended in a bubble of quiet reflection. William's fingers traced the intricate embroidery on his ceremonial sash, remembering how his mother had once described the feeling of wearing such formal regalia. Princess Diana had told him stories about state occasions, about the mix of pride and nervousness that came with representing the crown. Her words echoed in his mind now, bringing both comfort and an ache of longing that had never quite faded. The Archbishop of Canterbury had arrived early that morning, his own ceremonial vestments prepared for the sacred duty ahead. He had conducted many significant ceremonies throughout his tenure, but crowning a new monarch was the pinnacle of his ecclesiastical career. As he reviewed the ancient liturgy one final time, he couldn't help but think about the young boy he had once blessed, now grown into the man who would lead a nation. Catherine, the soon-to-be queen consort, entered William's chamber with their children. George, Charlotte, and Louis wore their finest clothes, their faces showing a mixture of excitement and nervous energy. They understood the importance of the day, though perhaps not its full weight. Catherine's presence brought William back to the present moment, her steady gaze reminding him of all the reasons he was ready for this responsibility. The final preparations were nearly complete when William's private secretary approached with a small, wrapped package. It had arrived that morning with specific instructions to be given to the prince just before the ceremony. No return address marked the elegant wrapping, but somehow William knew exactly what it contained. His hands shook as he carefully removed the paper, revealing a treasure that would change everything about this momentous day. The sound of the great Abbey bells began to ring, their ancient bronze voices calling the nation to witness history. Crowds pressed closer to the barriers, children perched on their parents' shoulders, cameras focused on the Abbey doors. Inside, final checks were being made to every detail of the ceremony that had been planned for months. None of the organizers, none of the officials, none of the millions watching could have predicted what was about to unfold. William closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the presence of all those who had come before him. Kings and queens throughout history had stood where he now stood, facing the same mixture of duty and uncertainty. But this moment felt uniquely his own, shaped by personal loss, love, and a discovery that would soon move an entire nation to tears. The ceremony was about to begin, and with it, a revelation that would be remembered for generations to come. The mysterious package revealed its contents slowly, as if time itself wanted to savor the moment. Inside lay a small, delicate brooch that William had never seen before, yet somehow felt familiar. The piece was exquisite, crafted from white gold and adorned with sapphires that seemed to capture and hold the morning light. But it wasn't the craftsmanship that made William's breath catch. It was the accompanying letter. Written in handwriting he recognized instantly. The letter bore his mother's distinctive script. Though the paper showed signs of age, Princess Diana had apparently written these words years before her death, entrusting them to someone with strict instructions about when they should be delivered. As William unfolded the pages, his hands trembling, he discovered a message that reached across time to touch his heart on this most important day of his life. "My dearest William," the letter began, "if you are reading this, then you have reached The moment I always knew you would face with courage and grace. This brooch belonged to your great-grandmother, Queen Mary, and she wore it on the day she first realized she would one day be queen. I saved it for you, hoping that someday you might wear it as a reminder that love transcends time and duty." The letter continued with Diana's reflections on kingship, on the balance between public service and personal happiness, and on her hopes for the kind of monarch her son would become. But it was the final paragraph that brought tears to William's eyes. Diana had written about watching him play as a child, seeing his natural compassion and leadership, and knowing that he would grow into someone who could heal the wounds that had divided the royal family for generations. Catherine read over her husband's shoulder, her own eyes filling with tears as she understood the profound gift that had been given to them on this sacred day. The children gathered around, sensing the emotional weight of the moment, even if they couldn't fully comprehend its significance. Young George, the future king himself, reached out to touch the brooch with careful fingers, somehow understanding that he was witnessing something extraordinary. The timing of the letter's arrival was no coincidence. William learned that his mother had entrusted it to her former private secretary, specific instructions that it should be delivered on his coronation day. The secretary, now elderly, had kept this sacred trust for over 2 decades, waiting for the moment when Diana's final gift to her son could provide strength and comfort on his greatest day of responsibility. As William carefully pinned the brooch to his ceremonial robes, he felt his mother's presence in a way he hadn't experienced since her death. The small piece of jewelry seemed to carry her love, her wisdom, and her blessing for the journey ahead. It was more than an accessory. It was a bridge between past and present, between a mother's love and a son's destiny. The knock on the door announced that it was time to proceed to the ceremony. The archbishop waited in the corridor along with the other officials who would participate in the ancient ritual. But William needed one more moment to absorb the magnitude of what had just occurred. His mother, gone for so many years, had found a way to be with him on the most important day of his life. Catherine squeezed his hand, understanding without words the transformation that had just taken place. The brooch caught the light as William moved, sending tiny rainbows dancing across the stone walls of the abbey. It was as if Diana herself was giving her approval, her blessing, her eternal love to the son who would now carry forward the crown she had never worn, but had prepared him to bear with honor. The procession began to form outside the preparation chamber. The sound of the congregation rising to their feet echoed through the ancient walls. In moments, William would walk down that aisle toward his destiny. But now he would do so, carrying a piece of his mother's heart, a tangible reminder that love never truly dies, and that some bonds transcend even death itself. The great doors of Westminster Abbey opened with a resonance that seemed to shake the very foundations of the ancient building. As the first notes of the processional hymn filled the air, 2 billion people around the world turned their attention to their screens, witnessing a moment that would be etched in history forever. But none of them could see the small brooch that glinted beneath William's ceremonial sash, carrying with it a story that would soon move them all to tears. William stepped into the abbey's nave and immediately felt the weight of 1,000 years of tradition surrounding him. Kings and queens had walked this same path, but none had carried such a personal connection to the crown's recent past. The congregation rose as one, their faces showing reverence, excitement, and curiosity about the man who would soon be their king. Among them sat world leaders, dignitaries, and members of the royal family, all united in witnessing this transfer of power and responsibility as the procession moved slowly down the aisle. Television commentators around the world noted something different about William's demeanor. There was a serenity about him that hadn't been present in the rehearsals, a sense of peace that seemed to radiate from within. Royal watchers would later describe it as a transformation, as if he had found some source of strength that elevated him beyond the nervous prince they had observed in recent weeks. Catherine followed behind with their children, her own grace and dignity complementing her husband's newfound composure. The children walked with careful steps, understanding the solemnity of the occasion while still maintaining the natural curiosity of youth. Cameras captured every moment, but they couldn't capture the invisible thread connecting William to his mother's memory. made tangible by the precious brooch hidden beneath his robes. The Archbishop of Canterbury stood waiting at the altar, his ceremonial vestments gleaming in the filtered light that streamed through the abbey's magnificent windows. He had officiated at William and Catherine's wedding in this same sacred space, but this ceremony carried even greater significance. As William approached, the Archbishop noticed something in the prince's depth of emotion and purpose that spoke of recent revelation. The ancient words of the coronation service began, their cadence unchanged for centuries, yet somehow fresh and meaningful in this moment. Each prayer, each blessing, each ritual response carried new weight as William participated with an intensity that surprised even those who knew him best. The congregation could sense that they were witnessing something extraordinary, though. They couldn't yet understand what had transformed this ceremony from mere pageantry into something deeply spiritual. Television audiences noticed it too. Social media began buzzing with observations about William's unusual composure and the emotional undercurrent that seemed to flow through the ceremony. Royal correspondents struggled to identify what made this coronation feel different from others they had covered. There was an authenticity, a raw emotional truth that elevated the ancient ritual beyond its ceremonial requirements. When the moment came for William to take his coronation oath, his voice carried across the abbey with a clarity and conviction that moved many in the congregation to tears. He spoke the sacred words not as mere formality, but as personal commitment. Each promise weighted with the knowledge that his mother had prepared him for this moment through her final gift. The brooch pressed against his chest, a constant reminder of the love that had guided him to this altar. The crown itself waited on its cushion, heavy with jewels and history, ready to complete the transformation from prince to king. But William already felt the change occurring within him, brought about not by golden ceremony, but by the profound connection to his mother that the morning's revelation had provided. As he prepared to receive the crown, he silently thanked Diana for finding a way to be present for the most important moment of his life. The congregation held its collective breath as the climactic moment approached. Around the world, viewers leaned closer to their screens, sensing that they were about to witness something unprecedented. The ancient abbey seemed to pulse with anticipation, its stones having absorbed centuries of history and now preparing to witness the creation of a king who carried his mother's love as his greatest crown. The moment had arrived when the Archbishop would place St. Edward's crown upon William's head, officially transforming him from Prince of Wales to King of England. The ancient crown, crafted of solid gold and adorned with precious stones, had witnessed the coronation of monarchs for generations. But as the Archbishop lifted the crown high above William's bowed head, something unexpected happened that would forever change how the world viewed their new king. A single tear rolled down William's cheek as he knelt before the altar. Television cameras captured the moment, but viewers around the globe initially assumed it was simply the overwhelming emotion of accepting such tremendous responsibility. They couldn't know that beneath his ceremonial robes, Diana's brooch seemed to grow warm against his chest, as if his mother's spirit was somehow present in that sacred space. Blessing her son as he accepted his destiny, the Archbishop paused for just a moment, sensing the profound emotion radiating from the man before him. In all his years of conducting religious ceremonies, he had never felt such a powerful presence of love and loss intertwined in a single moment. The congregation sat in reverent silence, many finding themselves unexpectedly moved by the raw emotion they witnessed. Though they couldn't identify its source, as the crown settled upon William's head, he felt the weight of more than just gold and jewels. The responsibility of the monarchy, the hopes of his people, and the love of his departed mother all seemed to converge in that instant. But rather than crushing him, these forces lifted him up, filling him with a sense of purpose and peace that surprised even him. The boy who had once walked behind his mother's coffin had now become a king, and Diana's final gift had prepared him for this transformation. Catherine watched from her place of honor, her own eyes glistening with tears as she witnessed her husband's profound moment of becoming. She could see the change occurring in real time, watching as William embraced not just the crown, but everything it represented. The children sat with unusual stillness, somehow understanding that they were witnessing their father's greatest moment of growth and acceptance. The congregation erupted in the traditional cry of "God save the King," but the words carried new meaning on this day. People throughout the abbey found themselves more deeply moved than they had expected, as if they were witnessing not just a ceremony, but a genuine spiritual transformation. The emotion in the building was palpable, spreading from person to person like ripples in a pond. Television commentators struggled to describe what they were seeing. The ceremony was proceeding exactly as planned, yet something extraordinary was happening that went beyond the scripted elements. Social media exploded with posts from viewers who found themselves crying along with their new king, though they couldn't explain why this particular coronation felt so different from royal ceremonies of the past. When William rose from his knees as the newly crowned king, his face showed a transformation that went beyond mere titles. The man who stood before the congregation had somehow found peace with his past while embracing his future. The brooch remained hidden beneath his robes, but its influence was written in every line of his face, every gesture of his hands, every word he would soon speak to his people. The ancient ritual continued with the presentation of the royal regalia, the orb, scepter, and the other symbols of monarchical power. But William received each item not as mere ceremony, but as sacred trust, understanding that his mother's love had prepared him to wield these symbols not for personal glory, but for the service of his people. Each piece seemed to connect him more deeply to the responsibility he had accepted and the love that would guide him in fulfilling it. As the ceremony moved toward its conclusion, the emotional undercurrent that had begun with William's tears had spread throughout the abbey and beyond. Millions of viewers found themselves unexpectedly moved, sensing they had witnessed something authentic and profound, though the full story of Diana's final gift remained hidden. The stage was set for a revelation that would soon transform tears of wonder into tears of understanding and love. As the coronation ceremony reached its final moments, King William III prepared to address his people for the first time as their sovereign. The prepared speech lay before him, carefully crafted by advisors and reviewed countless times. He looked out at the congregation and thought of the millions watching around the world. He made a decision that would surprise everyone, including his own staff. He set aside the prepared remarks and chose to speak from his heart. "My dear people," William began, his voice carrying clearly through the abbey's ancient stones, "today I accept the crown not just as a symbol of power, but as a commitment to serve you with the same love and dedication that my mother showed throughout her life." The mention of Diana sent a ripple of emotion through the congregation. But William was just beginning his unexpected revelation, with hands that trembled slightly. The new king reached beneath his ceremonial robes and withdrew the delicate brooch that had been his mother's final gift. As he held it up for all to see, the precious stones caught the light streaming through the stained glass windows, creating tiny rainbows that danced across the abbey walls. The congregation stirred with curiosity and emotion, sensing they were about to hear something extraordinary. "This morning," William continued, his voice growing stronger with each word, "I received a gift from beyond time itself, a letter written by my mother years before her death, along with this brooch that belonged to my great-grandmother, Queen Mary. In her final words to me, she wrote that love transcends time and duty, and that this piece would remind me that I never face my responsibilities alone." A collective gasp arose from the congregation as people realized they were witnessing something completely unscripted and deeply personal. Television cameras zoomed in on the brooch, its beauty and significance now clear to millions of viewers. Royal correspondents found themselves at a loss for words, covering a moment that no amount of preparation could have anticipated. Catherine wiped tears from her eyes. She watched her husband share this intimate family moment with the world. She understood the courage it took to reveal something so personal during such a formal ceremony. But she also recognized that this was exactly the kind of king her husband was meant to be, one who could bridge the gap between tradition and authenticity, between duty and love. "My mother wrote that she hoped I would grow into someone who could heal the wounds that have divided our family and our nation," William continued, his voice now steady and clear. "Wearing her final gift, I make a promise not just to uphold the traditions of the crown, but to serve with the compassion and empathy that she taught me. I will be a king who remembers that behind every title, every ceremony, every protocol, there are real people with real hopes and real need for understanding. The impact of his words was immediate and profound. Throughout the abbey, handkerchiefs appeared as guests wiped away tears. On television screens around the world, viewers found themselves crying alongside their new king. Moved by the raw honesty and love that had transformed a formal ceremony into something deeply human and real. Social media exploded with reactions as people shared their emotional responses to the king's unexpected revelation. Hashtags related to Diana, to love transcending death, and to the new king's compassionate leadership began trending worldwide. News outlets scrambled to understand the significance of the brooch and the story behind Diana's final letter. Even the usually stoic members of the royal family were visibly moved. Prince Charles, William's father, watched with obvious pride as his son transformed what could have been a traditional ceremony into a moment of genuine connection with the people. The other royals, accustomed to maintaining formal composure, found themselves touched by the authenticity of William's revelation, as William carefully pinned the brooch back to his robes. The symbolism was clear to everyone present. This was a king who would carry his mother's love as his guide, would rule not from a position of distant authority, but from a foundation of human understanding and compassion. The ceremony was nearly complete, but its emotional impact would resonate far beyond the abbey walls, touching hearts and changing perceptions of monarchy itself. The final blessing echoed through Westminster Abbey as King William III completed his coronation. But the emotional resonance of his revelation continued to ripple outward, like waves from a stone dropped in still water. As the congregation rose for the recessional, there wasn't a dry eye in the ancient building. What had begun as a formal ceremony had transformed into something far more powerful, a moment of genuine human connection that would be remembered for generations. Outside the abbey, the crowds that had gathered to celebrate their new king found themselves unexpectedly moved by what they had witnessed on their phones and portable screens. Street parties that had been planned as festive celebrations took on a more emotional tone as people shared their reactions to the king's tribute to his mother. Strangers embraced, united by the shared experience of witnessing authentic love. Triumph over protocol and tradition. In living rooms across Britain and around the world, families gathered around their televisions found themselves discussing not just the pageantry of the coronation, but the deeper meaning of William's revelation. Parents used the moment to talk to their children about the importance of family, love, and remembering those who have passed on. The king's honesty about his grief and his mother's continuing influence opened conversations that might never have happened otherwise. News outlets worked frantically to understand the full story behind Diana's final letter and the mysterious brooch. Royal historians were called upon to verify the provenance of the piece, confirming that it had indeed belonged to Queen Mary and had somehow made its way to Diana's possession. The story of how the letter had been kept secret for over 2 decades added another layer of intrigue and emotion to an already powerful narrative. Social media platforms became flooded with personal stories as people shared their own experiences of loss and the ways loved ones continue to influence their lives even after death. The hashtag love transcends time, taken from Diana's letter. It's become a global phenomenon. So millions of people found comfort and connection in the king's brave sharing of his most private moment. Mental health organizations praised William's openness about grief and loss, noting that his public display of emotion helped break down barriers that often prevent people from expressing their own feelings. Grief counselors reported an increase in people seeking help, inspired by seeing their king acknowledge that even those in positions of power and authority carry pain and find strength in remembering those they've lost. The royal family's public approval ratings soared in the days following the coronation, but more importantly, the monarchy itself seemed to have undergone a transformation. William's decision to share his mother's final gift had humanized the crown in a way that years of public relations efforts had failed to achieve. People saw their king not as a distant figure of authority, but as a son who still missed his mother, and drew strength from her memory. Catherine later revealed in interviews that she had never seen her husband as at peace as he was in the moments following his decision to share Diana's letter with the world. The burden of keeping such a precious secret had been lifted, replaced by the joy of sharing his mother's love with millions of people who had also mourned her passing. The brooch became a symbol not just of royal heritage, but of the enduring power of a mother's love. In the months that followed, King William III's reign began with an unprecedented level of public support and affection. His coronation had set the tone for a monarchy that would be defined by authenticity, compassion, and the understanding that true strength comes from acknowledging our vulnerabilities and the love that shapes us. Diana's final gift had not only comforted her son on his greatest day, it had given the world a king who could lead with both his head and his heart. The coronation of King William III would be remembered not for its pageantry or protocol, for the moment when a son honored his mother's memory, and in doing so, showed the world that love truly does transcend time, death, and even the weight of a crown. The surprising moment that left millions in tears had become the foundation upon which a new era of monarchy would be built, one guided by the eternal wisdom that love is the greatest power of all.